Hello and welcome to Harvesting Our Wellbeing as Educators. I'm Maura Higgins with Hugh Fitzmaurice and Meg Durham. Today we're going to have a conversation with Meg. Meg is coming to us from Australia. Meg is a wellbeing educator and coach. She has been an educator for 13 years and we're looking forward to hearing what Meg's wisdom is around wellbeing for educators. We'll drop into a moment's stillness to bring us into this space. Thank you both. Meg is going to read for us John O'Donoghue's poem. To come home. Sorry, Meg. Apologies. It's over to you, Meg.
May all that is unforgiven in you be released. May your fears yield their deepest tranquillities. May all that is unlived in you blossom into the future graced with love.
Hugh.
Brilliant. Thanks, Maura. Thank you. Meg, it's fantastic to have you with us all the way from Australia, from Geelong in Australia, I think, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, wonderful to have you. And I have to confess, I'm currently Meg has a course online called Energy by Design, and I'm currently doing it and loving it. So thank you, Meg. It's great. So it's great to have you with us. So I was going to open just I suppose first of all to ask you how you are with your COVID experience over the last while. How have you found it from your experience in Australia? Be fascinated, and as an educator, how have you found the experience over the last while?
Well, it's been a fascinating 12 months. It is something that I don't think we'll ever really be able to understand for a while, just how many moving parts we've experienced and how many waves. Some waves of, I can't do this, this is too hard, to waves of, wow, there's so much possibility, things are changing, I'm seeing things differently, and to, oh, I'm exhausted, I just cannot get through this. So here in Australia, we're in a very privileged position that schools are back face to face. There's very minimal restrictions and we're starting to move around quite freely. So we're in a really good position, but it wasn't always like that. We had a long period, particularly in Victoria, in Australia, long periods where very tight restrictions, full masks, students at home, people working from home, and some really intense times. So I think to sum it up, it's been a complete roller coaster. And then as far as the wellbeing side, for me, it's quite exciting because I've been in wellbeing education for 10 years, and I feel like the last 12 months has accelerated the growth in this space by that whole 10 years put together. Because we've been under so much pressure, people have not had any other choice but to take care of themselves or find new strategies, because what they were doing wasn't working, or it's got them to a certain point and now they're so fatigued and exhausted that they're looking for new ways, and really got that knowing now that the way that we were practicing pre-COVID is just not sustainable for healthy, happy lives. So there's been a lot of hardship and there's also a lot of possibility. So it's a bit of a roller coaster.
Brilliant. Yeah, the roller coaster, we can definitely identify with that because it's been like that here as well, and it continues to be. So just interested from the point of view of education in Australia and well-being, and like I think you said before a quotation you said, Meg, that you'd like to see well-being visible in a visible component of everyday school life. And like well-being is something here we're very much looking as part of education, but just from the Australian perspective, what does that mean when it comes to school, or what does it mean in your view, well-being and education in schools? What kind of things do you like to see happening? So
ideally, in my future world, I would love to see well-being spoken about like we talk about numeracy and literacy.
Yeah.
Like it has the value, it has a place, and it's also tangible. It's not just something that happens. It's not just something on a brochure, that we cater for the unique needs of our students and we cover wellbeing, but actually how, when, by who's trained. You know, when I did my training as a teacher, initially, my first 4 years as a PE and science teacher, wellbeing wasn't mentioned once. Relationships wasn't mentioned. It was all about being a content teacher. But I really believe in order for our students to truly learn and grow and to be able to engage with content, they need to feel like they belong, that there's connection, that there's a sense of meaning and purpose in what they're doing. And I don't think we give that enough attention. So ideally, I think wellbeing is just as important and just as visible as any other area in a school. And it's not something that just happens, because we don't just say maths just happens. It doesn't just happen. We need to put conscious daily effort to make it happen.
Brilliant. Yeah, and as you're saying, like that, you'd like to see it part of teacher education, a central component that's very visible. Yeah, I get that. And I was just thinking, you're saying a conscious daily habit, like along with I'm just thinking about energy of educators over the last while has been really played with, you know what I mean? Because the up and down, the roller coaster you talked about there, and we're facing after Easter, teachers are coming back to, hopefully, fingers crossed, full schools, but it's the uncertainty around that. So I'm just thinking around energy and around how we maintain that energy, or noticing our energy, or, you know, what your thoughts are around energy and for educators, and what advice you could give or wisdom.
Well, I think energy is vital. I think it's the absolute foundation. You know, there is so much work we can do within the positive psychology space, within wellbeing education, but we can't actually do it if we don't have the energy to make it happen. You know, to be in wellbeing, you're swimming against the tide. It's a really disruptive process because it's confronting, because you're encouraging people to think about their behaviours, to think about their choices, and that's an uncomfortable place to be in. And generally, when we're tired, we're depleted, the idea of anything that takes any ounce of energy just feels repulsive. I cannot even think about it. But that's where I come in, is about encouraging people to move beyond the initial resistance, because it will make them feel better in the long run. So let's break this down really simply. I teach every day the battery, and I'll go through it with you now. And so everyone who's listening, I've got 5 questions for you to see how charged your battery is today, and how that's going to influence the way that you are in your family units and in your classroom. So how you are and how you show up. So in the last 24 hours, have you had enough sleep for your body? In the last 24 hours, have you moved your body? In the last 24 hours, have you had food that nourishes your body and your brain? In the last 24 hours, have you had some connection, a good quality laugh with a friend? And in the last 24 hours, have you had some rest? And so depending on that, that is going to give you a good indication of how clear you're thinking and how conscious your choices are. Because when we're fully charged, we're clear, our choices are generally quite conscious, and our priorities are very clear, we know what's happening. But when our battery is flat or non-existent, we are just reactive to the world. Everything becomes urgent, everything becomes exhausting, and it's hard to prioritize because you're just so overwhelmed and it's so hard. So it's about trying to find realistic ways to charge your battery every 24 hours, and then having that self-compassion that, oh, I didn't work out today, what can I do tomorrow? Because we're in this cycle as educators where we're depleted, we're exhausted, and then we beat ourselves up for being depleted and exhausted. And then we go on to do the behaviours that make us feel depleted and exhausted, and see that vicious loop. So exhausted, beating ourselves up, exhausted, beating ourselves up, where I really try and challenge that to, how about we charge ourselves and give ourselves compassion, so we're more likely to charge again. And so it's a positive loop. And then you start to have more energy. And then once you have more energy, you actually then look to do things that make you feel that way, because you want to feel better, because you're in that cycle. But when you're in a depleted cycle, you're looking for activities that reinforce that depletion. So the simple things, sleep. How much focus are people putting onto their sleep? I know it sounds so basic, but the foundations of resilience are sleep. Like, you cannot make good decisions when you're exhausted. And we all know what it's like to be exhausted.
Hugh, may I ask a question of Meg?
Of course. Yeah.
Meg, John O'Donoghue's poem is called To Come Home to Yourself. And it's really interesting that you say sleep is what helps to build resilience, because that is coming home to yourself. Can I ask you, the first line he has, may all that is unforgiven in you be released. And you speak about self-compassion. And I think that is the answer to what I'm going to ask you. But may all that is unforgiven in you be released. As an educator, do you see that that is possible within the education system? That all that is unforgiven in you can be released?
I think it's an interesting point that you raised, because when you look at the system, there's lots of moving parts. So as a collection, I think it's possible, but it begins with individuals giving themselves permission to be human.
Mm.
You know, when I first started out teaching, I actually didn't really acknowledge that I was human, that I was flawed, that I was imperfect and I couldn't do it all. I was desperately trying to please, perform, produce, all of the things to look like I was on top of it. I had it all together because I was desperately trying to get that approval from everywhere that I went. And that's not the best way to live life, because you're always chasing, you're always striving, you're never good enough. Whatever you do is not enough. It's like the myth of perfection. Like, what is perfection? It's an illusion. There's no such thing as the perfect teacher. And so once I started to learn more about self-compassion, I realized that I'm human and I can't do it all. And I'm actually, the way that I was working was setting myself up for, unconsciously, I didn't choose to, but I was unconsciously setting myself up for failure every single day. Because what I would do, I'd start my school day with this to-do list. And the Meg that was writing this to-do list was the early in the morning up and about Meg. It wasn't the 4 o'clock, just finished a full school day. And so the time I got to the end of the day, it's like, oh, I haven't got everything done on my list. But really, the person who wrote the list was super high achieving, you know, this magic version, superhero Meg, not the reality. And so every day I would be setting myself up for failure. But I think when we bring in self-compassion, we realize we're human. We're going to do the best we can today, considering our circumstance, considering the personal choices I've made in the last 24 hours, and then considering what it's going to pop up. We know as teachers, we have ideas of the day, and then all of a sudden we're blindsided and we have to be with the student for the rest of the day. So just noticing that, I love that saying of, you can't control the waves, but you can learn to surf, and it's okay. I remember, this is a really funny story. When I was in my full swing of, you know, desperate to perform and desperate to show everybody that I could do it, I was sharing an office with a science teacher. Chris is his name, and he's the most incredible man. And he used to plant lots of seeds with me, I think, trying to help me move towards this self-compassion. And one day he just looked over and laughed and said, oh, Meg, how are you going over there? As I'm busily trying to get everything done. He's like, are you winning the battle against the forces of disorder?
Brilliant.
I don't even know what you're talking about, but I'm just really trying. And then I've learned that I'm not going to win the battle against the forces of disorder, but I can be me, I can show up, I can do my best. And at night, I go to bed, put my head on the pillow and know that I've done my best. I am human. Yeah. And I'll try again tomorrow.
And brilliant, Meg. Yeah, I just love the idea of that, which you said, self-compassion is us being human. You know what I mean? That realizing that we'll make mistakes and letting go of that, you know. And I love and I think I said this before to Maura, confronting, like, well-being. Why is it difficult sometimes for us? Because we have to confront what you said, confront our behavior, confront our patterns of behavior, what we're doing. And that can be very, very difficult, you know. And I was just thinking there around self-compassion, right? On a busy day, you have class, it's a really difficult class, and you're saying, I want space now to have a cup of coffee, and then you have to supervise a class, and then there's a behavior issue with discipline, and something else happens. I'm just thinking, how do you carve out that space for self-compassion? You said about battery, your battery is low, you know, it's a Thursday, and your class after class, and creating that space of, so you're not left, you know, like this at the end of the day, a ball of anxiety. Create that space for compassion. You know, how to, have you any thoughts on that? You know, in the middle of a busy school day, it could be the principal, it could be, you know, a teacher or whatever, but carving out that space to confront that behavior, so it doesn't, the same pattern doesn't happen, that we can actually create a space for ourselves.
I think what's really important in a school day is transitions. Transitions are key to the way staff feel and students feel. Because if I rush through the day, I rush from a meeting, I rush to class, I rush to duty, and there's no pause, it's like trying to read a book without any punctuation.
Yeah.
Like, that would be exhausting.
Yeah.
Because you don't even know where it starts, where it finishes, and who's talking, and where the full stop. And so what I really focus on with educators is, how do you set up your day? And it's not the big things. It's the micro moments. It's the walking into class, and as we've started this conversation, just arriving. Take a breath. You know, the simple practices that I work with educators, smile as the students enter the classroom, like consciously, just smile. Let them know that you see them, that you care about them. The power of the smile is incredible. And then to use someone's name.
Yeah.
Like, when you're using someone's name, that's connection. That's a moment to pause. So you look them in the eye, you smile, use their name. That's a break. That gives your brain a chance to have a break. And when you have a break, you're more likely to be settled. And then you can just remind yourself, oh, we're here for connection, and let's get on with it. And we all know that when we have good connections, the content part's much easier. But if you race into a classroom and you've pulled off 5 kids in a row, and then you try and jump into content, how good is the energy in the classroom?
Not good.
So it's about the transitions.
Making that space, you know, making the space for the as you said, the transition, taking the breath, and not being caught up with, oh, I've no time, it's so busy, you know, the busyness of school life. I have to get this finished, I have to do that, I should do that kind of language. But you were saying, like, slow it down, be aware, I suppose, noticing how we are, I suppose, isn't it? You know, noticing in the school day how you are, and making that space. Yeah. And just, you were saying about the importance, I think you said, about connections, relationships, and the relationships, I suppose, we have with others around us, whether that's the students or colleagues, and the relationships with ourselves, and creating boundaries. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that area, or that area, Meg.
Oh, I've got so many thoughts on that area. It's one of my
I thought so.
absolute favourites. And so the framework I think in my head is connection, content, and then correction. We've got to build up the rapport with our students, with our colleagues. So you've got some foundation, and then you can go into the content. And then once you've got into the content and you've got that strength, then you can challenge. And then we need to be able to challenge at a rate that we can tolerate. So the rate of challenge for one student is completely different to another. You know, I still remember one student, like Daniel, and I would say, Daniel, and he's like, yeah, miss, yeah. It did not faze him. It did not bother him that I was just reminding him, like, come on, back onto task. But then if I did that to another student, they may not speak to me for a term because I'm too hard on them. So we need to take the time to actually notice how our students are responding to us and how we can develop that relationship, because the stronger the relationship, the more you can challenge people. But if you don't have a relationship, they're not going to be able to tolerate the challenge, which means there's going to be a disconnect. And the more disconnection, the harder it is to actually get what you need to get done. So the content piece falls apart when it's disconnected. And that's when you're just desperately try and get some connection back. So I really work on connection first, build up the connection. And as educators, we're really good at connecting with the students that are like ourselves. It's like we're really good at connecting with the colleagues like ourselves. That's natural. We're human. That's a part of it. And so finding the ones in the class that it's not natural and it's not as easy, and work at it. So a simple strategy that I work with my educators all the time is give me your class list. Let's have a look at it, get 3 highlighters and go through. One highlighter, I know them really well. I could tell you their siblings, what football team they go for. Okay. The next highlighter, oh, I know them okay, a bit about them. And then the next highlighter, gee, I haven't actually said their name for weeks. I really need to focus more effort on them. And that's where I come back to this design model, being conscious about our choices. So looking at your class list and noticing, how are your relationships going? How strong are they? Are you able to challenge them because you've got that connection? And the same with our staff teams. If you're a principal lead listening to this too, it's exactly the same. I remember saying to a principal once, don't you miss the classrooms? Like, I've got my own, like staff, like all the different personalities, and working through. So executives need to be looking at their staff to see, how much do I know about my staff? Do I know who needs an extra hand? Do I know who's got a challenging divorce happening at the moment? And actually taking notice of the human experience, and then we can build connection, and then we can absolutely fly with the content, and we can get through so much because we're clear. But if we don't have connection and we're starting from disconnection, you're really pushing against it.
Yeah, that's very
I can't wait to read Meg's book.
Yeah, big time. Big time. Yeah.
Yeah, and Meg, what we've done in Ireland is we have a wellbeing program that we've brought in as compulsory at second level, which is for children from the age of 12 to 15. And we've brought in the content. What's missing is what you've spoken about. And how can we possibly look to what John O'Donoghue says, may all that is unforgiven in you be released? That's not going to be touched when the relationships aren't there.
Well,
sorry,
more for coming back. Yeah, it's exactly. It's the human connection, isn't it? It's the human, and noticing and taking time to notice that. It's the foundation. What is school's all about? Relationships. Between ourselves, each other, and the kids, and that's exactly what you're talking about, which makes complete sense to ourselves anyway, isn't it? More, and I suppose we're trying to create a space to hear that more, isn't it? Create the space for people to connect, and that can't happen. Like you talk about growth, like this is I suppose it's a time for growth now. It's spring, flowers are coming up and stuff like that. Well, if there's going to be new growth. Sorry, I'm going on myself here now, but from this conversation, it'd be great to see in schools just taking time after Easter just to connect. Put the exams. I know leaving certs of the 6th years have to do it in our schools here. It's a really important exam, Meg. But just taking time to connect with each other. I think that's what you're saying. It's slowing down to connect and noticing that area. Well,
it's really interesting because Moira, you brought up my Achilles heel,
which is
wellbeing programs. I've written one myself. I've got Mind Fitness, which is all about being mentally fitness for life. But the content means nothing if you don't have the right educator. It means absolutely nothing. And I know that that's so challenging for people, and it's disruptive and it's confronting, but you need to have educators in the room that are living it, that are breathing it, and are an example of it. So let's look at I actually think it's more detrimental to bring in content in a wellbeing program with an untrained teacher than you're better off not doing it, to be honest. I just don't see there's as much benefit. It would be like me, if I rush, oh, we've got to do this mindfulness now, kids, quick. Oh, why aren't you sitting? Oh, God, I can't even do 30 minutes. How is that making me feel like, oh, that's a good thing, she's got it together, I really want to do that. I taught Body Pump. So Body Pump is a group fitness class where you do weights to music, and I did that for years. And you want to be someone that participants inspire to be, that there's, I want to look to them like, yeah, that looks great, that looks a possibility. And I think we have a responsibility as educators, and particularly wellbeing educators. Wellbeing educators have the highest responsibility to be well, to be the example, to be that, to do that daily practice every single day. You know, my job, sometimes I wish I was an expert in another field, like maybe something that was an end result and I could just do it once and I tick that box and I've mastered it and then I can teach about it. But I don't. I'm in the wellbeing space and I'm human. I've got a almost 4-year-old and a 2-year-old and a husband and running a business and working with educators. I am human and I'm in this world too, and life happens to us, but I am so committed to taking responsibility for the way that I feel and function, to be an example for other people. I want my life to be art for other people, that they can look at me and be like, that is the art of living well. Walk your talk, doing it. So when it comes to wellbeing programs, I think there's great intention. I really see why there's a benefit of it, but I think would actually have more benefit if we had educators that were feeling well, were functioning well, and just being with their kids for that 30 minutes and connecting would almost be better than trying to jam some wellbeing content in with a teacher that's exhausted and doesn't believe in it, because they may believe in it, but they just don't have the energy to take on one more thing. So we really need to flip the script back to connection and back to human, and then let's go from there.
So right. Hugh, can I ask Meg to read the poem again in light of this wonderful conversation?
Sorry, Maura, just one thing, sorry, that's in my head. Sorry, coming across you, Maura. It just, one of the things you touched on there, I think that's very powerful, is vulnerability. And showing our vulnerability. And what about like coming in as a teacher and look, saying to the students sometimes, like, I don't feel great, you know, and being human. What you said there, like, we're not gods, you know what I mean, or just being ourselves. And what's that modeling back, instead of like repressing everything? Like, I'm in an all boys school, you know, and you know, what's the life skills we want to teach them? Like, I'm coming in, everything's fine. Yeah, how are you, lads? Great, let's get going to learning. You know, but some days, the reality is some days you don't feel great, you know, and I think that there's a great, I know Brené Brown is talking about the power of vulnerability, but there's a great power in it. And what you said there, it's just kind of like almost like a letting go. Myself and Maura were talking about the idea of letting go before our conversation, and there is a sense of that, just from that, what you were talking about there.
Well, it's a relief. It's a relief that we're human. And the reality is, our students are clever. They know we're not feeling good. Yeah. They're not silly. Like, they can feel it. They can feel it off our nervous system. They're regulating off it. And so if we just acknowledge the reality, they actually feel safer, because they know you're not trying to put one over them and pretend like I've got it all together, because like they know you don't.
Yeah.
The students are clever. They pick up on it. They know. So if you just acknowledge, like, I am really at my edge. Like, this is really, really, really tough. And in order for me to get through this next lesson, there are a few things that I've got to do. And that's just what I started doing with my students. And they thought I had lost it. And I just got more and more clear about, you know, it's been really busy, so we're going to have to start with some mindfulness. It's not just for you, it's actually for me too, because I need to get my head here and we need to be able to focus and work through. And over time, they felt so safe with me because they knew that how I was feeling and how I was showing up was congruent, and there's an alignment there. And that makes them feel like, so when she's on, and when she's off, but there's no pretending. And that makes them not feel like they're unsettled and not sure where they are. So I love that you bring up that vulnerability piece. And yes, Moira, we've digressed. So what would you like me to do?
Well, I think when you and I do these conversations, John O'Donoghue is with us, and really throughout this conversation, you've brought his words alive. Will you read his poem again for us?
I'd love to. May all that is unforgiven in you be released. May your fears yield their deepest tranquilities. May all that is unlived in you blossom into the future, graced with love.
Beautiful. Yeah. Meg, I have to say, I could keep talking here for the next 2 hours about it, but that wouldn't be fair because we have to have self-compassion for each other and make and space. So really enjoy. It's just so valuable what you're after saying about energies and connections and self-compassion and the humanity that is education. You know, that it's people. We talk about a system, but it's people talking to people, and how valuable that is, and how, how I suppose, what a wonderful position we're working with young people and working with wonderful people around us, but to see that, to take the time to notice what you're talking about, notice that and see that and value it, and value ourselves, so been really enjoyable, and thank you so much. And I couldn't recommend Energy by Design anymore. It's a wonderful course as well online. Thank you, Meg. Really great.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And hopefully we'll talk again. Thank you, Maura. Thank you.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.